Ferrari's bringing a new engine to Austria. Every headline this week is treating that as a catch-up move. Ferrari playing defence against Mercedes. But there's a different way to read it. The technical compromises Ferrari deliberately made at the start of 2026, the smaller turbo that costs peak power, the exhaust that bleeds horsepower for aerodynamic gain, the cylinder head designed to run temperatures rivals can't touch, those weren't mistakes or oversights. They were a setup, a calculated trade placed before the season started in anticipation of a regulatory window that was always coming. Austria is where the payoff begins. First, a quick explanation of what ADUO actually is, because it's the mechanism that makes this upgrade possible, and most coverage treats it as a footnote when it's actually the whole story. ADUO stands for Additional Development and Upgrade Opportunities. It's a system baked into the 2026 regulations that allows the FIA to measure every power unit on the grid and grant extra development opportunities to manufacturers whose internal combustion engine is lagging behind the benchmark. If a manufacturer's engine is between 2 and 4% behind the benchmark, they get one extra upgrade this year and one in 2027. If they're more than 4% behind, they get 2 upgrades in each of those years, plus additional cost cap relief and dyno hours to fund the development. Now here's the detail that surprised the entire paddock when it leaked during the Monaco weekend. The benchmark engine, the one all other manufacturers are measured against, is not Mercedes. It's Red Bull powertrains. That result places Mercedes itself in the lower bracket, behind the benchmark by just over 2%, which means they qualify for one upgrade this season. Ferrari sits between 4 and 6% behind the Red Bull benchmark, which earns them 2 upgrades in 2026 and 2 more in 2027. And according to multiple sources, Ferrari has been planning how to spend those 4 windows since at least the end of last summer. Ferrari's third power unit of the 2026 season is being shipped to Spielberg. The upgrade centres on the cylinder head, a steel alloy design that can withstand combustion temperatures that would structurally destroy a conventional aluminum unit. Ferrari has already been running intake air at above 100 degrees Celsius entering the intercooler, compared to the 60 to 70 degrees typical of rival designs. This upgrade pushes that temperature toward 110 degrees. It's a doubling down on Ferrari's core philosophy, not a departure from it. Shell's Hamburg laboratory has developed a new fuel compound specifically engineered around this higher temperature combustion architecture. Reports estimate the combined power gain at 4 to 5 horsepower from the engine itself, plus a further 2 to 3 from the fuel, just over a tenth of a second per lap. That sounds modest. At a power-sensitive circuit with 4 active straight-line mode zones, a tenth is often the gap between winning and losing a qualifying session. Here's what most coverage is missing. Austria is the validation step, not the main event. The bigger upgrade arrives at Monza in September, when Ferrari introduces its 4th power unit of the season alongside the second ADUO allowance. Reports indicate that second step could include revised turbo architecture, adjustments to blade geometry and impeller angle aimed at recovering peak power at high engine speeds without sacrificing the low speed responsiveness the smaller turbo already delivers. The 2 phases combined are expected to recover around 30 horsepower of Ferrari's total deficit, which sits at somewhere between 40 and 45 horsepower against the benchmark. Not the full gap, but enough to make the SF26 genuinely dangerous at every circuit type, not just the slow and medium speed corners where the chassis already excels. Ferrari's internal target is power parity with Mercedes by Monza. Austria is the proof of concept. This is the section that most coverage gets wrong or skips entirely. Ferrari did not accidentally fall behind on power. Every horsepower they gave up at the start of the year was a deliberate trade against something else. The smaller turbo, reportedly around 10mm smaller in compressor diameter than the units used by Mercedes and Red Bull, costs an estimated 5 to 7 horsepower at the top end of the rev range. Ferrari chose it anyway because a smaller turbo spools faster, improves launch performance, and delivers better throttle response in low-speed acceleration phases. Across an entire season, that advantage is real and measurable at race starts and out of hairpins. Ferrari also integrated an exhaust assembly that directs airflow to generate aerodynamic downforce at the rear of the car. That costs additional horsepower. They chose it anyway because the aerodynamic return was calculated as worth significantly more in lap time than the raw power it costs. Other teams in the paddock are not happy about it. Multiple teams have complained to the FIA that Ferrari deliberately limited their own power unit performance in order to qualify for ADUO, effectively engineering access to additional development tokens they then spend recovering horsepower they always had the potential to produce. Ferrari's own team principal Fred Vasseur began lobbying for ADUO eligibility during pre-season testing in Bahrain, before a single competitive lap had been run. The ADUO system, as its designers acknowledge, measures ICE output in isolation. It does not account for the aerodynamic or packaging gains a manufacturer extracts by making their engine physically smaller or thermally hotter. Ferrari exploited the gap between what the regulation measures and what the regulation rewards. Here's where it leaves the championship. Hamilton is 41 points behind Antonelli with 17 races remaining. Ferrari's chassis is, by Lando Norris's own assessment, the best on the grid in cornering performance. Austria adds a tenth of a second to a car that already won in Barcelona. Monza in September adds another, potentially larger step. And Mercedes, despite operating the benchmark adjacent engine, has also been granted one upgrade of their own, which means Ferrari is chasing a target that isn't standing still. But for the first time in 2026, Ferrari isn't reacting to Mercedes. They're executing a plan that was designed before the season started in 2 phases with specific circuits in mind. Austria is where that plan becomes visible. Whether it works is something else entirely, but it was never improvised, and that might be the most important thing to understand about what's happening in Spielberg this weekend. What do you think? Did Ferrari game the ADUO system, or was this just smart engineering? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe for full coverage from Austria all weekend.